We were talking about Brazil and basically Elon's reaction, if you like, to the suspension of Twitter in Brazil, and that the fines that Brazilians will have to pay up to $9,000 if they try to access Twitter via a VPN. And you were telling me just before the break that Elon's not too bothered by it. Why is that?
Well, Elon has a lot of things to worry about besides that. It's a country. There are 190 countries, so Brazil is a big country, but I think you let it play its course. Let them do their thing. Let them have their infighting or whatever it's going to be. There will be two sides to the argument in Brazil anyway. And the other thing that's important about Brazil that must be known, Brazil is infused by the industriousness and self-reliance capability of the Portuguese people. It has the Portuguese culture of survival and success. So you don't have to worry about Brazil. They will always come right because they are infused, much like places that have the British original infusion. They're infused with a certain quality of people. And so I'm not too worried about Brazil. So let's see what happens over the next few months. But any interference by civil servants is to be expected. They are weak people. They're frightened of being taken down. They don't have any confidence in their own ability, and therefore they try to force things on others, and it never succeeds. It didn't succeed in Soviet Russia, and it's not going to succeed now.
And Elon's response, as you say, Elon's not too bothered about it. He's the master. No. The master of response. Where does he get his sense of humor? He called Moraes an evil dictator, is what he said. He's had similar responses to the EU. Where does he get his sense of humor?
Oh, well, I think we've always had a sort of Monty Python sense of humor ourselves, from the very beginning. And then it was taken a bit further by the Far Side, Gary Larson's Far Side. And so we are definitely disciples of, sort of Far Side Monty Python humor. And at the end of the day, don't take things too seriously, and don't take yourself seriously as well. And the kids have been like that with me from the beginning. I used to be a censor. I used to be a censor. I was appointed to the censor board of South Africa in the mid-'80s. And my job was to review films, initially books and magazines and so on. And then it was theater and film. And so I would often bring the films home. And these films were all intended to be reviewed for the censor board. And the kids watch them and let them tell me what they think. So the young musketeers used to help with the reviews, did they? Is that what happened? You're saying Elon sat at home telling you it was okay? Especially Kimball, he would be able to say to me, "Oh, Dad, this is a lousy movie, or this is a good one," or no. I didn't see my kids as dopes. I saw them as smart from the day they were. I would listen to them if they came to me with an argument. I would listen to their arguments. They were often right. So and
but censorship, Errol, on those sort of bases didn't work on whether the film's any good, but about the content of that sort of movie. What sort of things were censored?
Well, if God or Jesus were mentioned, then it was censored. But you could have any amount of F words, and you could have any amount of violence, which was crazy, but you couldn't have anything that said God or Jesus.
Well, you mentioned Monty Python. You mentioned Monty Python. Obviously, famously, The Life of Brian was pretty clear as to the religious connotations there. Did that get through your censorship requirements?
Yes, that was banned immediately, and many other things. I mean, the Beatles were banned, and and so on. But it just took time. Takes time. Nowadays, of course, nothing here is banned. So, it's just the way it goes. People's point of view, And I eventually became chairman of the censor board in the province in which I lived, which is the Transvaal. So I was able to push through things that others that would normally have, they would have said, "Oh, we're not going to allow this," or "We're not going to allow it." I was able to get a lot of improvement on that sort of score, And I used to actually argue about the violence that was being shown on films, and which would create copycat sort of people, and so that worried me more than anything else.
Yeah,
but
I'd agree with you, Errol. We often hear sex and violence lumped in together. People complaining about content on television back in the 1970s in Britain. There was Mary Whitehouse and the Viewers and Listeners Association. I'm sure you remember that, Andrew.
Lord sex and violence.
But sex and violence have nothing to do with each other. Copycat sex is one thing. Copycat violence is quite another. And personally, I think the saturation of cinemas and television with extreme gore, the violence has become much more visceral in films these days. Films that were Certificate X, which was the 18 category in Britain in the 1980s and 70s, they're now played in the afternoons for children to watch. They're considered so innocuous,
It is. Go on. What I find fascinating, Errol, as well, is that you were sitting there with your children, basically acting as the censor, if you like. And so the early days of freedom of speech and expression basically would have had an impact on the young Elon growing up. Is that a fair summary?
Yes. In my family, I never heard my mother or my father ever, especially my mother, ever issue a swear word, ever. And hell was considered a swear word, if you know hell. So if you said, "Oh, hell," that was considered a swear word. And certainly with my children, we never ever used any kind of foul language, which is now used everywhere, ubiquitously, as they say, and which is wrong. And it's sickening, actually. And so when I remember back in the 80s when we would show some of these films and they had, foul language, and it was kind of embarrassing to me. For the children, because they were teenagers, and I said, "Well, we don't talk like that. Shouldn't be talking like that." I didn't know what to say, actually, because it started becoming quite a lot of F words and stuff, and you never used that at home, and so it was embarrassing in a way. In fact, I must tell you, in the 70s, I went with Elon's mother to a show on Broadway in New York, and I was taken there by a very well-known company. In New York, they designed, for example, the Opera House and the Grand Central Station. Anyway, they took us to the show, and it was an incredibly good stage show on Broadway, and there was a few F words in it. And this American gentleman who owned the company and his wife apologized to me and May afterwards for the language that was used. They apologized. They asked us, would we accept their apologies for the language used on stage? And so that gives you an idea.
What was your response?
No, I said, sure. If I used foul language with Elon's mother, I'm quite sure she would have gone home to her mother, and told her mother, and then I'd be on the red carpet sort of thing. No, you couldn't use foul language. You couldn't use foul language with with that family, and with May. I mean, hell was considered a swear word,
Yeah, and
so
it is interesting.
That's sort of really slick, but. Well, there's a comment I'd like to make about, these days comedians use swear words for cheap laughs, especially on television. Yeah. If you use the F word, you seem to get an automatic laugh. But a lot of the innuendo and the double entendre that people like Max Miller or the Carry On films used to use, that's somehow become politically unacceptable for some reason. All the sort of saucy postcard kind of humor, a lot of it's considered demeaning to women.
And that was harmless.
In fact, it was funny, and you didn't use the swear word. You implied it, and it was very funny. But now you can use the swear word, but you can't imply it.
Yes. And they had more laughs. And I was thinking about that the other day. For example, in the Jerry, what's it called again? The Jerry
Springer.
Heavens, the American TV show with
Seinfeld.
Jerry Springer.
Seinfeld.
Seinfeld, not Springer.
Oh, Seinfeld.
Sorry, Seinfeld. There's absolutely no vulgarness in Seinfeld, and yet the laughs are 10 a minute.
Right.
So I mean, much better laughs, and quite frankly. If I occasionally watch some of these comedians, the so-called comedians, I find it revolting. I just don't enjoy it. Yeah. And, it's just not funny at all. And to listen to these people talk the way they go on, and I don't think I don't want my children, my youngest daughter's 23. She doesn't talk foul language to me. In fact, when I was in America, I think it was in fact about 6 months ago, and all this woke stuff was being thrown around, or sort of on the media. And we arrived in America, my second wife, my daughter, two daughters, their mother, and I, and they live in Texas and near Elon. And we were looking for these, sort of, we were expecting to see these trans dresses and everything everywhere, and trans people, and we spoke to my daughter, and she said, Dad, there's absolutely nothing here. You have this place is a squeaky clean. There's absolutely nothing, no sign of any of this kind of thing. We've never seen it here, and you will never see it. And she was quite right. And we traveled through several states, through Florida, Texas. We went down to the rocket launch that time, and we never saw a single sign of anything but the healthiest possible community imaginable.
Right.
So it's really odd that we're being pumped with this stuff. And I saw on a news article the other day that some Irish teacher refuses to teach transgender stuff to children in class this week, and she was fired. I think it's just to create a media attention. I don't think it's happening anywhere. We certainly don't have any of it here in South Africa. And
right.
I challenge any man that I've ever known I've just traveled the length of South Africa to go and dress himself up as a woman and walk around town. Now, it's all fair. I've done that. I've been to trans, what do you call it? Switch around parties. We've all been to the odd switch around parties. What do they call it?
Well, cross-dressing. I'm not sure about where people dress up, men dress as women and women dress as men. You've been to those sort of parties?
Oh, I've done that. I've certainly been to at least 4 of such parties, and they're hilarious, absolutely hilarious parties. And but I mean, that's all in good fun.
That's a completely different thing from
South
a man.
Africa's,
Well, I was just going to say, first of all, it's a completely different thing from a man trying to legitimately pass himself off as a woman. A completely different thing altogether. And also, it's not really in the African mentality. I don't think the idea of changing sex, enters their head.
Yeah. I don't know. Among the African mentality, no, God. The African mentality simply just says no to that all the way, But that's them. But as far as people in general are tolerant, I mean, relatively tolerant these days. I think it's good. There's a certain amount of tolerance to, I suppose you could call it homosexuality, which is better than it used to be. And, but it's nothing new. And quite honestly, it's not in your face, and it's not something that you have to deal with, and seeing some ugly bugger dressed up as a woman. I've never seen that. Never seen. In fact, no. When I was a student, I worked in a steakhouse, and this was the best steakhouse in Johannesburg. So they really pumped through the people, and everybody loved this place. It's called the Porterhouse. And one day, and I worked as a waiter, and the owner was very friendly to me, and he came to me one evening, and he's seen May coming there quite a lot to fetch me and so on. He said, well, after tonight, let's go to the Diamond Horseshoe nightclub in Johannesburg. Johannesburg in those days was an absolutely wonderful place to be. I mean, it was just the best city in the world, and for entertainment and all that sort of stuff. And so we went to this nightclub. At that age, I was probably about 19. I'd never actually ever drunk whiskey or anything like that. And certainly May had never drunk any alcohol. But anyway, we went to this place, and it was very expensive and all that. And we sat in these booths. But walking in, I saw a few very beautiful women dancing on the dance floor. And one was a particularly good-looking woman with blonde hair and a red dress. And she was just absolutely, you couldn't take your eyes off her. And Rob, the owner of the Porterhouse, said to me, so Errol, he was much older than me, of course. He said, so what do you think? And I said, well, gee, that blonde is beautiful. He said, Errol, that's a man. That's a man. I said, I couldn't believe it. May and I was, like our eyes on stalks, trying to figure this out. Because this was one really beautiful woman. And, sort of I made a few excuses to walk to the toilet, to the gents or whatever you call it, so that I could get a closer look. But I could not tell that this was a man. I couldn't, but Rod said to me, this is a man.
Yeah, it's quite extraordinary. What I love about this and this
that's
conversation,
50 years ago. That's 55 years ago.
But it puts it all in perspective. And I think growing up and understanding where Elon's coming from with the sense of humor, which clearly he got from his father, and also when you're talking about censorship and the respect, I mean, that's the key to all of this, isn't it?
Yeah.